Ang alarum ayara asak dakok unangach akok atchaningiram tanadagusi ilaranang yakdakok kawalangam tinangan kugun na nakarizak ilunam tanadagusi ilan na nakarizak adang Thomas Stepetin asak tanach aku tanam ilaranang yaktanach anang anak singer asak dakok ilulam tanadagusi ilan na nakarizak UAA ilan na wazak ukuran iram nakoch. Hi everybody, my name is Haliehana Stepetin. I'm Unangax and I was born and raised in the village of Akutan, right next door from here. I live on Tinangan, or the lands of the Kawalangan people, in the village of Iluluk, the village of Unalaska. My dad was Thomas Stepetin from Akutan and my mom is Annette Singer here from, she lives in Unalaska, she's from California. And Kukang Madi Japanaf Stepetin Asaktanach Akutan Mama Kungam Ilaran and Yichtanach Laturing Nat Hukach Ilaran ang Yichtanach my and Laturing Arthur Stepetin Asaktanach. My grandma and my grandpa were Maddie and Arthur Stepetin, and my grandma Maddie was from Akutan and Akun, right next to Akutan village. It's just across the bay and I lived across the pass, and my grandpa was Art Stepetin of Netchukach, or Sandy Beach Village on Unangax Island. It's so good to see you all today and to be here and to live in Unalaska for the time being. So I'm a PhD candidate in Native American Studies at the University of California, Davis, and I have a designated emphasis in Studies in Performance and Practice. I'm also an instructor of Alaska Native Studies at UAA. And it's my PhD doctoral research that has brought me here to Unalaska. My tentative dissertation topic is Unangax subsistence cosmologies, performing protocols of sustainability, food sovereignty, and environmental justice. That title might change, but basically the main topic of my research and the reason that I'm here is to study and to research stories of subsistence and how people in communities who might be subsistence practitioners, so hunters or fishermen or gatherers, or traditional foods workers and people who have seen these events done throughout their lives. I'm really interested in hearing those stories from their childhood and from how they might be participating in subsistence economies today. So my work is really trying to expand the understanding of subsistence, or in Unangax kakamiro, because subsistence is really a wholly inefficient word to discuss some of the things that are coming up in my research. So it depends on generation to generation though, right? So perhaps some of the generation who lived through Angsa and Anilka might consider subsistence more of a legal or a policy word, whereas my generation might consider subsistence as literally all of these things that we do every day to live and to eat the foods that we've always eaten, and to gather and to live off the land and the waters in Unangax way. So I'm using that word right now as a placeholder to mean all of these things. And really what I'm doing here is visiting with elders and young people and everyone in between about their stories of subsistence and whatever they want to share with me. What I hope to, and I didn't come out here thinking that I would find anything in particular. I'm really trying to be as open as possible with what I'm encountering in my work. And sometimes that means I'm not doing, a lot of visits. Some weeks I have like 4 or 5 visits planned out in a week, and other days or other weeks it's just me building relationships with communities and being present in these different events and activities. But I'm hoping to understand the different changes that communities are witnessing from their childhood to now, and perhaps how we're experiencing climate change in Unangax and the Aleutian Islands, and how our stories of subsistence might give us ways to handle climate change, and also might help us understand some of how climate change is impacting our subsistence harvests. So a big part of my work is expanding the subsistence definition that the Alaska Department of Fish and Game provides, right? This definition is very singular and it's very limited, and it says that subsistence is an event and it's quantifiable and it quantifies like resource extraction, but that's just not how Unangax people understand subsistence, right? And this is something that one of the critiques whenever I ask elders, I'm like, can you talk to me about subsistence? And they'll say, well, subsistence is a policy word, you know, and I understand that. So I'm really trying to argue in my dissertation how subsistence is way more than a policy word, but in fact a cosmology or an entire way of being and knowing and existing in the world, understanding the world in Unangax and being Unangax in the world. Right. Yeah, so in my visits out here, my time out here in Unangax, I am using and employing a gidal or visiting as a methodology or a method of conducting research. And I was very intentional about that throughout my whole dissertation process. It was several years ago in 2018 and 2019 that I was able to travel to 9 villages in Unangax when I worked with the PICTA, the Aleutian Keweenaw Island Community Development Association, as a cultural curriculum coordinator. And when I was with the PICTA, I was able to visit with communities and really start to develop this visiting as a method. And it was before that, in fact, in 2016, when I worked with Tara Bordikoski, who's Unangax from St. Paul, at APIA, at the Aleutian Keweenaw Islands Association, that I really started to understand the significance, what she called it, Hustiluk, because that's what they call it in the Tanakamirim dialect up there on St. Paul and St. George. Agidal is the Nirorim to new word, and I know that I'm in Kaulagam in the Eastern Aleutian Islands, but my Unangax teacher is Karidach Moses Dirks, and he's Niro from Atka, and he's been teaching me Nirorim to new for a couple of years now, and he co-teaches with me at UAA. So I'm using the words that I know in Niro and the words that he shares with me to think through how to conduct research in an Unangax way. And basically what I've landed on and what I've been developing with the help of all of these people and visiting in my whole childhood as a way of relating with one another is that I have come in here. I'm funded by the Social Sciences Research Council. They provided me with the International Dissertation Research Fellowship to do this research, to live out here for 8 months, which has been critical. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do this without that support. And they understand that international means tribes. So tribes as sovereign nations are an international entity to the Social Sciences Research Council. So I'm very thankful for that and for the funding there. So I do have to give them a shout out with my being here. But a gidal, or visiting as a method, involves building relationships. It's something that Unangax people to this day still do every day. I know that the elders that I'm living with still go and visit other community members every morning and have coffee together. And that's, Mr. Dirks calls that time snaluchs, but snaluchs is particularly like when hunters get together in the morning and they talk about the weather and they talk about hunting and what they might go gather for the day. So I'm essentially trying to recreate that snaluchs environment, or this visiting environment. Everyone does it. We have tea time. People will call you up, or when I'm in my village in Akutan, you'll just show up to someone's house and they'll put on a cup of coffee, or they'll put on a kettle of water for some tea, and we just start visiting and talking about whatever is relevant for the day. And usually it's built around our foods and what we eat. So I wanted to use visiting as a method because it's a method of relationship building. It's a method of accountability, where I am accountable to the people who sit down and visit with me and share with me. Which means that whatever they share with me, I'm going to show it to them first before I write it in my dissertation, right? And any ideas that I generate based on these visits, I'm going to share it with them. I haven't gotten to that stage yet. I'm only 4 or 5 months into my research, and I haven't started writing my dissertation yet. I'm planning to start that this summer. But once I start the dissertation writing, that's really when I'll be in conversation again. So it's built on the cyclical relationships of communication, which are really common to Unangax ways of relating and communicating, where it's not just one time that I want to visit with someone, but I want to keep coming back. I want to keep building on the conversations that we've had, and keep stimulating the conversations around these topics of subsistence or gathering or literally eating native foods as we visit, right? Like that's a big part of it, is me bringing any of the foods that I've harvested throughout the year to these conversations and having conversations around that, where I've asked, oh, do you know how to, make this particular soup? Where did you learn how to make that soup? And they're sort of unstructured conversations. And I was very intentional about this because the history of research in Unangax and largely for Native communities has been one that's extractive, where Native communities are a place that outsiders will go to, take what they need, and then presume to be an authority on and about Native peoples, and tell this story that is void of Unangax perspectives or Indigenous perspectives, and is only benefiting that one individual. I want to be extremely clear that the only reason I'm going to get this PhD is because of my community. So it's really the community and the people who interact with me and who choose to share with me. It's due to them that I'm going to get my PhD. They're the ones granting me my PhD. It's not just like an individual thing that I am gifted this knowledge from people, and through that knowledge I'm able to write my dissertation. But also my role as a writer in the academy, getting my PhD is to fiercely protect those people too. It's not to go and tell everything that I possibly can about Unangax people and publish it for just anyone to pick up, right? I know that some of these stories that people share with me is because maybe we have a deeper relationship. Maybe they're my cousin. And they're lessons for me. So instead of me sharing the exact lesson that comes up in the visits or the exact contents of the visit, I'll write about how visiting is a methodology to teach people, or to share lessons, or to share protocols, or to share values, to reiterate all of these important parts of subsistence and parts of being Unangax. In my research, it's been really critical to leverage Indigenous voices. When I'm here, I'm visiting with Unangax people and people who are like adjacent to Unangax communities. Like there's some folks who might not be Unangax but are married to Unangax people. So our understanding of kinship is like very expansive, right? It's not exclusive. So a big part of the knowledge systems that I'm working through are Unangax knowledge systems that understand subsistence as a way of teaching. So through subsistence, we're able to reiterate these value systems and these protocols and these entire ways of knowing. It's through subsistence activities that knowledge transfers for Unangax people, and probably for many Alaska Native people. But of course, my research and my knowledge is particular to Unangax peoples and the communities that I'm from, and the communities in the Eastern Aleutian Islands that I'm visiting, which include the village of Unalaska, Nikolski, and Akitan. So I'll be heading to Akitan and Nikolski this summer to continue this research too, and to continue visiting with community members. So yeah, the major knowledge system here is based upon subsistence knowledges, and where our interaction in, on, and in proximity to the ocean facilitates learning. So it's through our relationships with Aloho, or the ocean, that we're able to transfer and transmit these knowledge systems, these ways of doing things. It's how we learn about the weather. It's how we learn about the tides. And it's through relationships with people. These don't happen in a vacuum. They don't happen on your own. It's not an isolated event. It's layers and years of observing and intently watching the weather and the ocean and the migrations of different animals, or what I call more than human kin. And this is just, kind of an academic word. I'm trying to keep all of the academic words out of this, but what I mean by more than human is literally all of the other entities in the world, including the weather, including the ocean and the water and the sky, and the seals and the sea lion and the chinekyo, and like all of these different components of the world around us in Unangax. Everything that is not human, I'm referring to as more than human. And I do this in my work. So I'll try to keep the academic jargon at bay. But yeah, so it's really important to me that all of the work that I create and co-produce, because I'm not doing this alone, and co-theorize, is through Indigenous knowledge systems. For too long, I think researchers and folks have come out and extracted from Indigenous communities, not just Unangax communities. This is true for all over Native North America. And we're void of these Indigenous perspectives and these critical perspectives that can help us as we navigate a changing climate, as we navigate different environmental changes and perhaps environmental injustices that lead to us not being able to harvest, kasukis or badarkis or ahohunas or sea eggs, right? So it's just a conglomeration of knowledge systems that are not bound to an academic discipline like history or like science, right? Instead, it encompasses all of these components, and that's really an Indigenous way of knowing. So food for Unangax people and for myself, and I want to be clear also, I'm not speaking for all Unangax people. I'm speaking from my perspective. My perspective as someone who was raised in Aquitaine by my dad and my aunties and my mom. So my perspective is shaped by all of these different relationships to place. I lived in Aquitaine, I lived in Unalaska as a kid, I lived in Nikolsky as a kid, and I also lived in Atka as a kid. And through all of my different and varying interests, I have found that the one thing at the center of Unangax ways of knowing is subsistence or food. The food that we gather. I'm also an Unangax dancer and a performing artist. So at the center of all of my creation and creative activities, everything that I do, it always revolves around subsistence, gathering, hunting, fishing, and traditional foods and sharing. Sharing is probably the number one part of subsistence that makes it really a relational activity and helps us to understand the significance of subsistence in communities. So the significance of food is literally the significance of our survival out here in Unangax in the subarctic, in these villages, especially in villages like Aquitaine, where I'm from, where the food from the store is really a supplement to the traditional foods that we gather year round, right? And here too, even though we have access to foods at the store or at restaurants in Unalaska, really the significance of kakamilo, subsistence foods, is that it connects us to our culture. It brings back memories. It invites relationships. Just this weekend, I was able to hunt my first seal in my whole life. This was the first time I've ever got a seal in a myself, and really did the whole process with Tasang, my hunting partner, my sister, and my hunting mentor, Cody. We were able to do all of it, and we gave every part of our seals away. And this was important. I was just talking with a community member a month ago or two, and she said, it's important that you give away the very first thing that you catch every season, whether it's salmon, whether it's a seal, whether it's a bird, whether it's, badarkis on the reef, which I guess we can't eat here. It's important to give it away, and you give it to an elder. You bring it to an elder, someone who can't do these things on their own anymore. They rely on, younger hunters and fishermen and gatherers to do this work. And that way, we will keep being gifted foods every cycle. So I thought about that. I thought about what she said. I made her a little ration. I made her, I cut up a piece for her specifically and some chadok or seal oil for her, because I was thinking about that. She said it's important. If we stop doing that, then we won't be gifted these things in the future. So yeah, food is important to our whole way of living and being and knowing and our continuing survivance here. So Unalaska, or Iluluk, is my first site that I've come to conduct my visits and to do my research, which includes a number of things. It's not just visits. I've also been teaching at craft night at the Kalengan tribe, which is great for me because it helps me build relationships with folks. I also studied here at the Museum of the Aleutians. I studied some of their collections that were relevant to Unangax people and subsistence. And I started this research in Anchorage in December, doing archival research. And really the way that I'm using the archives is to bring what I'm learning there to the community and ask them about them by showing them a picture like, oh, do you know who this is? Can you tell me about what's happening in this picture? Did you know that you can go to the archives and research yourself too? So if you're getting an inundation of researchers, I've been like telling people to go research so that they have stakes in the archives and the collections. But because this is my first research location in Unangax, my first of 3 villages, I've just been coming across so many new things that have really been so exciting. One of the things about Iluluk or Unalaska is that there's a mix of different hunters. There's a lot of new young hunters who are just starting, or perhaps have participated in hunting as a kid, or maybe they first started hunting or seeing hunting practices at Camp Kumayuk in the summers under Mr. Dirks. A lot of people who I've interacted with have been mentored by Karidach, Mr. Dirks, Max Leclerc, who is Yupik, I believe, and he used to be a teacher out here. And Vince Tudiokov, the mayor and the honorary chief of the Kalengan tribe. So many people have referenced these 3 really profound and well-known hunters throughout their, as they're starting or beginning their Kakamiluk journey, as hunters particularly, or fishermen. I think the most exciting thing to me as a young, new, very novice, very infant hunter is that there are so many women who are Unangax women who are stepping up to the plate to do these things. So I would say historically, at least in the past 200 years, Unangax women have always played a significant role in Kakamiluk through sharing foods and butchering and cooking for people. But before my lifetime, say in my dad's generation, Unangax women weren't really doing this work. It was mainly men's work, doing the hunting. And I honor and I respect that legacy. However, I'm just really excited to see so many young women stepping up and doing all of these things. They're not just cooking and sharing and learning these processes and teaching kids about it. They're also going out and hunting. So I think that's probably the most interesting component that I found here. I didn't, as a person who grew up doing all of these things anyway, my dad really taught me, my dad Thomas taught me all of these subsistence practices. He taught me the significance of knowing the water and the weather. And, despite being a girl, he wanted to teach me all of these things. He wanted to take me on the water. And he really wanted to transfer what he knew, and he was so proud to do that. And my dad Jacob Stepetin in Akutan, he also has been really important and really critical in me learning these things, because he has so much knowledge of, growing up hunting under some of these elder Unangax people who are no longer with us from Akutan, Bill Trapanoff, Tom Petikoff, all of these people that he's told me throughout the years that he learned from. He shares that knowledge with me, my younger brother Jacob Mark, and my sister Robin. And it's just been so inspiring to be able to pick these things up and really to make my dad proud. That's really what I want to do. And my late father, I want to make him proud, and I want to do these things that he wanted me to do. So it's been so cool seeing what's going on here in Unalaska, and I just feel so honored and so privileged to have been invited into this community, to have been able to share at craft nights and culture nights with people, and to be able to connect with all generations of people here. I think it's been so critical, and I've learned so much, and I have so much to write about in my dissertation that I cannot wait to share with the community. So everything that I write, I'm going to share it with everyone who's interacted with me and shared with me and visited with me or built a relationship with me that led to me thinking these things. And I can't wait to do that. I'm hoping to have my PhD by next year, which will be something that everyone here has had a role in. I would just like to say KUCB, thank you to everyone here in Unalaska for taking the time to meet with me, to visit with me, or to talk about my research, or just, I just love this community so much. So thank you for letting me be here.